Hey everybody. Um, so wanted to go ahead and get the second video going. Um, I know that some of you are probably on your way to work or going to pick up kids from school or any assortment of different things. That is perfectly fine. As I said at near the end of the last video, I'm going to, this is all being recorded, and I'll post the link of this on Blackboard as soon as I'm done with this video. This one it might be about the same length as the last one, probably shorter because I have less to talk about. I wanted to talk about three different um, endocrine structures that we're going to deal with a lot this semester, and I want to kind of take my time and go through them. I'll start with the one that has the most stuff, which is the adrenal gland. Um, I had so hoped to have been in class and kick class off with lab today because I wanted to talk about a lot of different organs and structures, because the structures we were going to talk about today, I really like talking about those. Those are really fascinating, interesting. They're integrated into our everyday life. People always have lots of questions when we start getting into it. It's really cool. And instead, I'm relegated here on the couch. Um, One of the things I wanted to talk about in both lecture and lab was the adrenal gland. And the adrenal gland has another name. It's also known as the suprarenal gland. That's suprarenal, suprarenal. Supra is related to superior, which means above. Renal means kidney. So above the kidney, suprarenal. If you like cars, then I'm not I wouldn't claim to be a big car person, but there are certain cars that I really like, and the Toyota Supra was always a car that I always dreamed of having. They're bringing Toyota Supra back, and I'm not happy about it because it's not made for anybody my height. And if you're my student, then you already know how tall I am, and I can't fit in that new car. So yeah, that's a dream deferred for a little while. Anyway, suprarenal means above the kidney, and you find the adrenal glands, the suprarenal glands, located on top of the kidneys. Now, these structures are most commonly known for producing adrenaline, but I'm here to tell you that that's not the only thing that they do, and it's probably only a fraction of what they do. So your adrenal glands are what we commonly nickname soft organs. They don't have a bone in them. They don't have cartilage. They don't have any rigid, solid, not solid. They don't have any rigid, dense tissue inside of them, something like cartilage or bone or some type of really tough, dense tissue. They don't have anything in them. So we call those soft organs, things like the adrenal gland, the pancreas, the liver, the spleen. Those are considered soft organs. And so, because it doesn't have anything like that, soft organs typically have an outer layer and they have an inner layer. It is important to know what happens in each layer in these organs as we cover them this semester. Hint, hint, because uh, you might get asked a few questions on the test about the layers. All right. You'll see that coming up on these first lecture and lab exams. I'll give you an example. The adrenal gland that we're talking about now, the adrenal gland has a cortex, sorry, pain, it has the cortex and has the medulla. The cortex is the outer layer, the medulla is the inner layer. Think of a watermelon. Most of you have eaten a watermelon or a cantaloupe or a honeydew melon, or you've eaten some melon in some culture. And most melons have some similar anatomy to them. They have an outer layer, which is more of the melon rind, and then you have the inner layer, which is all of the pulp. Well, a soft organ is the exact same way. The melon rind would be the cortex, the pulp would be the medulla. There you have it. The cortex is functional, the medulla is functional. You have to pay close attention to that with soft organs, because what happens in the cortex is usually totally different than what happens in the medulla, and all of it is important. In this case, the adrenal gland only makes two hormones in its medulla, the epinephrine and norepinephrine. That's it. That's the only thing you're making in the medulla of an adrenal gland, epinephrine and norepinephrine. And both of those put together give you adrenaline. Well, that made that pretty quick, huh? It's easy to think about what adrenaline does. It's easy to think about what epinephrine and norepinephrine do because both of them were talked about in 210. So you've heard of them before. You've at least heard about them in a movie or some science fiction book. You comic books, cartoons. Everybody talks about epinephrine and norepinephrine. They stimulate fight or flight. Enough said. So you just have to think about the targets in your body that would send you into fight or flight. Now, the cortex is different. The cortex is broken up into different zones. There's 3 zones. And they're called zona instead of zones. Zona fasciculata, zona glomerulus, and no, I said that wrong. Zona fasciculata. I'm trying to remember. I hope that's not the medication kicking in with my memory. But there's 3 zones in the cortex. You got this. That's embarrassing. The zona fasciculata, the zona reticularis, and the zona glomerulosa. There it is. Okay, and so those 3 zones make up the cortex, and each one of those zones are actually producing an entirely different group of hormones. Yeah, it gets even more complex than that. So now you're in the cortex. You got those 3 zones: the zona fasciculata, the zona glomerularis, and the zona reticularis. And the zona reticularis, that's the deepest zone. That guy makes androgens, which androgens are male sex hormones. Women produce androgens and utilize them because women don't have male gonads. So that's the only source of male androgens that a woman can have naturally from inside her body, which, for those of you who don't know, women use androgens like testosterone as a neurotransmitter. You just use it in very small quantities. Then small boys who have not undergone puberty, that's where they get their androgens from until they undergo puberty, and then they're producing testosterone from their male gonads. Then you have the zona fasciculata, and the zona fasciculata is responsible for producing mineralocorticoids. No, I'm sorry, not mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids. And the glucocorticoids are the one that's probably going to be the one that we're going to talk about the most is cortisol. Cortisol is cool. Cortisol is some magical stuff, man. Cortisol mobilizes energy reserves in the body during initial stages of fatigue and stress. It's a stress hormone. So when you got to stay up all night, you release cortisol. This pain that I'm in right now, I hate to say it, but cortisol is going to be released to try to help me deal with the pain. The thing about it is you don't want to stay with high levels of cortisol for too long, because a side effect of cortisol is it begins to neutralize your immune system. So the more cortisol you have in your system, the more neutralized your immune system becomes. And so you start shutting it down. That's why if you pull all-nighters constantly, or you're working 12-hour shifts constantly, you're under that stress and fatigue constantly, that cortisol is pumping and you just keep moving, you keep going. But when your body crashes, your body literally crashes and you're more susceptible to getting sick. That last zone is the zona glomerulosa, and that zone is the one that's making glucocorticoids. Not glucocorticoids. I keep saying this backwards. Yeah, it's the medication. It's the mineralocorticoids, and the mineralocorticoids, the one that we're going to be focusing on the most is aldosterone. And aldosterone, it focuses on retention of sodium from the kidneys, because sodium is salt, and wherever salt goes, water goes, and that's extremely important to your body. So if your body's trying to get rid of excess water, it'll throw away salt so that the water will follow it. If it wants to keep water, it'll keep salt. If you've ever poured salt on a slug outside, you'll notice that the reason why the slug dies is that the salt pulls the water out of the slug's body and they dehydrate to death. Yeah, I know it's like that. They suddenly go hating slugs to like having compassion on all slugs. So yeah, but that's the way salt in the water works. So that is the adrenal gland. I should have double checked on the zones for you before I said that. I'm sorry. That's the rashness, my hurry to try to get this part of the video out before any more of the medication kicks in. But yeah, you have those zones. Those are the hormones that are with those zones. Now, let me pause for a minute because I know what you're thinking. You know, Mr. Nixon, I was watching the other video. I'm watching this one. You're naming a lot of hormones. This seems a little post the question and then post the answer to that question. This is the memorization part I was telling you about right now. That's 40%. But then you'll remember that 40% of this class is understanding and 20% is critical thinking. So let me tell you where that other 60% is going to come from. At some point in time, you got to apply these hormones. And that's where it starts getting kind of to the nitty gritty. This first lecture test, a lot of it's memorization. There'll be some application. Once we break out of this first lecture test, I'm going to be applying these hormones. So for example, aldosterone in this video, I just told you aldosterone in this video controls the movement of sodium in and out of the kidneys. So aldosterone dictates whether we throw sodium away into the urine or whether we keep sodium in the blood, which goes back into the body. And I told you low sodium. So if I am dehydrated, I don't want to throw water away. I want to keep water. One of the ways that I can keep water is to release aldosterone so that I will keep sodium, because if I keep sodium, water will follow and it will stay in me instead of leaving through urine. That's an application. Did you follow that? Let me say that again. So we know that aldosterone monitors and manages sodium contents in the body. If I want to throw sodium away in the kidneys, I usually throw it away because I don't want sodium all the time. So I will release aldosterone when I'm dehydrated because I want to retain sodium, which will allow me to retain water. Let's take that up a notch. Let's put some emerald on that thing. All right. So if a person is stabbed multiple times, they receive multiple stab wounds, they get rushed into the ER, we should notice that aldosterone should be released because they have multiple stab wounds, which means they're probably bleeding. And if they're bleeding, then they're losing a lot of blood. And if they're losing a lot of blood, then they're losing a lot of water as well. So my body does not want to throw away water at the time that that person is bleeding, because why would you want to throw away water when over 50% of your blood is water? So you're going to want to retain water, which means that your body's probably going to release aldosterone so that you will retain salt, therefore retaining water. That's an application of what we're talking about. And we're going to be doing that with each and every single one of these hormones. You'll see. But you'll see it coming. You'll see it coming. We're going to talk about all of them. So that handles the adrenal gland. The next one, I decided to actually put myself a note in. I feel bad because I should have put a note about those zones. Is the pancreas. So the pancreas, we kind of talked about him Monday a little bit, just a little bit, because we talked about the hormones that came from him. Glucagon and insulin. Now, insulin is responsible for lowering blood sugar levels. Glucagon is responsible for picking blood sugar levels up. You kind of have to keep in mind what your body is using sugar for. See, when I think about sugar, I think about something I'm going to eat. You know, when I think about sugar, I'm thinking about snacks. For example, I had a real hankering for bourbon pecan pie the other day. And no offense, I kind of still do. But my favorite places to get that are nowhere around here at all. So I would literally have to travel. And as you can see, I ain't traveling nowhere. I'm laid out on this couch. So bourbon pecan pie, that's out. But if I had some, it would be great right now. I'd love it. The bottom line, the point of that I'm trying to make is the fact that when we think of sugar, we just think about things that we're eating or you're trying to lose weight or something like that. But you got to remember the cells of your body like sugar. We've painted sugar out to be this evil, bad thing, but it's an essential nutrient. So when we say it's an essential nutrient, it means that your body can't make enough of it by itself in order to sustain itself. So it needs sugar. It needs glucose. So we don't cut glucose out completely, and it's not really all that easy for you to cut glucose out completely if you knew what glucose was actually in. And I'm not just talking about processed foods. I'm talking about natural foods too. So you bring in these carbs, you break them down, you basically use most of it as glucose, and your cells process the glucose and use it for energy. Why does it need energy? Because energy is currency. Energy is the currency that it uses for metabolism, which is the sum total of every chemical process going on in your cells right now. So you need this stuff. So you got to remember, glucose is extremely important to trillions of cells in your body every single minute. Knowing this, the management of glucose in your checking account, aka the bloodstream, is very important. So when I add sugar to my bloodstream, I'm probably going to need to go ahead and mobilize it and put it somewhere. So I'm going to release insulin to take it out of the blood and put it somewhere. When I need more sugar in my blood, I'm going to release glucagon to take it out of the savings and put it into my checking account. Now ask yourself this question. When would my blood sugar go up naturally? You're right. It will go up naturally if I just ate a meal. So I had lunch, unfortunately, an hour ago. That was the last time I was able to get off the couch. And I had lunch, and there was some carbs involved. No pecan pie. Sorry, a lot more healthier than that. But I had lunch, and those carbohydrates are going to get broken down, and they're absorbed into my bloodstream. And once they're absorbed into my bloodstream, my blood sugar is going to go up. So naturally, insulin is going to be released from my pancreas so that it can target all the cells in my body to say, hey, go ahead and let some of the sugar in and utilize it. Whereas if I woke up first thing in the morning, like this morning, I woke up just a few minutes before 6 a.m. so I could go out and take a run with the dog, which was what you heard barking in the first video. So I went out to take a run. Well, I don't like eating before I go work out. I don't like eating before I go for a run. I prefer to eat afterwards. So getting up, stretching, waking up, getting my workout clothes, getting the dog, and then hitting the pavement to go run. Dude, where was I going to get glucose from to run things? Well, naturally, my body released glucagon to bring blood sugar up to a level that all of those trillions of cells could tap into and provide energy so that it could do its job. The last thing is going to be the gonads. And we're not going to go deep into the gonads. What I got to say about the gonads will only take about 2 minutes because there's a whole chapter 28, that's all about reproductive system. And it goes through the gonads and it goes in great detail. All I want you to remember about the gonads is, number one, you got to understand the relationship between gonadotropins and the gonads. The gonadotropins are FSH and LH. That's it. There's just two of them. Follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. You need to remember that follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone target men and women, and they target men and women's gonads, but they arrive at different results. So FSH targets men and it causes sperm production in men. LH targets men and causes the release of testosterone or the production of testosterone. FSH targets women by stimulating follicular growth, which promotes the follicular cycle and the ovarian cycle. But LH actually leads to women ovulating at day 14. So those are different things that are happening with the gonads. You don't have to learn about the gonads yet. Like I said, there's an entire chapter we're going to go into at the end of the semester on gonads, but I want to go ahead and end the video there. That actually wraps us up for this chapter. There are some diseases and disorders that I want to talk about later, but I've created a PowerPoint or a note deck that covers all of that, and it's available in the Google folder that I provided the link to at the beginning of the semester. So I'll talk about that in a Blackboard post, and that's about it for right now. I'll see you in the next video.